issue, but linked to food security, rural livelihoods, economic diversification, and climate resilience. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight some of these key frameworks as well as initiatives that my department is actively implementing to drive this change. In the first instance, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, CADEP, at its core, particularly with the new Kampala Declaration and CADEP Strategy and Action Plan 2026-2035, is evolving to embrace climate-smart agriculture, sustainable land management, and food systems resilience. We are working to enhance productivity in an environmentally sustainable manner, ensuring food and nutrition security for all Africans, while protecting our natural resource base. This includes vital efforts in soil health, sustainable fertilizer use, and promoting agroecological practices. 2, the Continental Circular Economic Action Plan 2024-2035. This is a landmark strategic framework designed to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. It is our roadmap for transitioning Africa towards a competitive, yet inclusive and sustainable circular economy. By promoting resource efficiency, cleaner production, and regenerative practices, this action plan unlocks new value chains. It fosters job creation and builds resilient economies that thrive within boundaries. It is a powerful all sectors. Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, I am pleased, therefore, to invite you to the official launch of our Continental Circular Economy Action Plan on the 17th July from 6 p.m. The event is co-hosted by the European Union and in collaboration with UNEP, African Development Bank, UNDP, as well as UNECA. 3, the AU Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan of 2022 to 2032. This comprehensive strategy guides our continent's response to the climate crisis. It emphasizes adaptation, mitigation, and the critical importance of nature-based solutions. Through this framework, we are bolstering early warning systems, investing in climate-resilient infrastructure, and enhancing our capacity to access and effectively utilize climate finance, especially for fragile and conflict-affected regions. The 4th one is the Great Green Wall Initiative. This Great Green Wall Initiative stands as Africa's iconic response to land degradation, desertification, and climate change. With its revitalized 2024-2034 strategy, we are accelerating efforts to restore degraded landscapes, enhance biodiversity, and build the resilience of communities in the Sahel and beyond. It is a powerful example of how large-scale ecological restoration can unlock socio-economic benefits and foster peace. I look forward to engaging with ministers of the Great Green Wall Initiative to discuss how we can jointly and effectively implement our common strategy. The African Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan 2023 to 2030 guides our efforts to conserve Africa's unparalleled biodiversity, addressing the root causes of biodiversity loss and promoting sustainable use of our natural heritage for present and future generations. It aligns closely with the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In October, the Commission, in collaboration with the government of Botswana, are scheduled to host a biodiversity summit. This summit aims to mobilize political will and financial resources for implementing Africa's Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan at continental and national scales, with emphasis on practical, implementable solutions. The African Blue Economy Strategy aims also to harness vast potential of Africa's oceans, lakes, and rivers for sustainable economic development and ensuring that marine and freshwater resources are managed responsibly for food security, livelihoods generation, protection. Tied to this is the Ocean Governance Strategy. The AU-Africa Ocean Governance Strategy and Implementation Plan has been developed to address existing governance gaps, enhance coordination and implementation of existing frameworks. The strategy and implementation plan builds on key African Union frameworks such as Agenda 2063, the Africa Blue Economy Strategy, friendly goods and services. We are working to ensure that environmental considerations are deeply embedded in its implementation. We recently co-organized the third African Job Creation Forum together with the government of Ethiopia, the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and AE Trade Group. This Job Creation Forum serves as a continental springboard for scaling up youth-focused employment solutions, aligning policy and investment with Africa's broader goals for economic resilience. The successful implementation requires unprecedented collaboration among stakeholders. As we mark AMCEN's 40th anniversary, therefore, let us renew our collective resolve. Let us commit to accelerating the implementation of these vital frameworks. Let us leverage our ingenuity, mobilize necessary resources, and forge strong partnerships to safeguard our environment, build resilient economies, and secure a dignified future for all Africans. The time for talking has long passed. The time for decisive collective action is now. Let us move forward, hand in hand, towards an Africa that is environmentally vibrant, economically robust, and truly sustainable. Honorable ministers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, may I thank you all for your kind attention, and I look forward to fruitful deliberations with yourselves. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence, pour votre adresse. À présent, je voudrais inviter le Dr Kevin Kariuki, vice-président en charge de l'énergie, du climat et de la croissance verte à la Banque africaine de développement, à prendre la parole. Désolé, on me dit que le docteur Kevin Kariuki n'est pas là. Et l'honneur revient à M. Ibrahim Thio, secrétaire exécutif de la Convention des Nations Unies sur la lutte contre la désertification, à prendre la parole. Il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui n'est pas là.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais parler à la fois en anglais et en français, donc pour ceux qui ont besoin de leur système de traduction. Your Excellency, Dr. Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary of Kenya, Excellency Jacques Assohore Konan, Ministre de l'Environnement, du Développement durable et de la Transition écologique, la Côte d'Ivoire, Honorable Moses Vilakati, African Union Commissioner for Agriculture, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, dear Elizabeth Mrema, Deputy Executive Director of UNEP, dear colleagues Rose and the all colleagues from AMCEN and dear colleagues from UNEP. It's very nice to be back. 40 years ago, the environment was barely recognized as a dead leaf within most African governments. And yet, under the auspices of UNEP and the visionary leadership of its executive director at that time, the great son of Africa, Dr. Mustafa Kamal Tolba, AMCEN was born at the foot of the pyramids of Cairo, as if to give it a birth certificate worthy of its longevity and future reputation. I am proud to stand here today, not as one of the witnesses, but as one of the active founders of the first Continental Ministerial Conference on the Environment. AMCEN is nothing less than that, a pioneer and as strong as a rock. Even at its inaugural conference, AMCEN was right to make the fight against desertification one of its top priorities. This was a move that, at the Rio conference later in 1992, earned widespread admiration by securing the adoption of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD, along with the other sister treaties from Rio, namely the Biodiversity Convention and the Climate Convention. AMCEN was certainly right, as over the past 70 years, Africa has lost up to 60% of its arable land, whilst its population has grown sixfold. AMCEN was also right, as in the last 4 decades, the extraction of African resources to meet global needs has never slowed down. Soil and subsoil resources, timber and non-timber forest products, fishery resources, and so on. Today, African land and water are the subject of various forms of covetousness, further proof of their inestimable value. At its extraordinary session held in Abidjan last year in preparation for UNCCD COP16, AMCEN firmly reaffirmed Africa's commitment to preserving its natural capital, which is a guarantee of its development, stability, and peace. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, quand les racines de l'arbre sont profondes, dit une sagesse africaine, il n'y a pas lieu de craindre le vent. Ce proverbe résume bien l'histoire de la conférence ministérielle africaine sur l'environnement, CMAE, une institution fortement enracinée dans la tradition de solidarité africaine et résiliente face aux adversités nées des négociations internationales. Depuis 4 décennies, la CMAE demeure le socle de la diplomatie environnementale africaine. Elle permet à l'Afrique de consolider ses positions, de parler d'une seule voix, défendant ainsi les intérêts stratégiques du continent dans les négociations multilatérales. En ce moment d'introspection et de bilan, permettez-moi de souligner 3 points qui, de mon point de vue, sont fondamentaux. Premièrement, renforcer l'ancrage politique de l'action environnementale. L'action environnementale ne saurait être limitée à la seule exécution de projets. Pour être transformatrice, la CMAE devrait être le moteur de l'adoption, simultanément à l'action de terrain, de politiques publiques appropriées et coordonnées à l'échelle régionale.
Policies at the regional level. Yes, AMCEN needs to be a driving force, able to transform environmental policies into drivers for economic transformation. 2. Strengthening investment to promote sustainable development in Africa. Less than 5% of environmental financing globally reaches African countries. This is a paradox because Africa has the greatest renewable energy sources in the world, and the African share of global investments, though, in the field in renewable energy represent less than 3%. This needs to change. Another African proverb says, when the lions don't have their own historians, the accounts of hunts will always glorify the hunters. Africa therefore needs to write its own stories when it comes to environmental financing. It needs to set out its priorities and access resources at just and reasonable interest rates. This needs a profound transformation of mechanisms and conditions to access investment for a just ecological transition, in particular in favour of small producers in rural areas, those who pay a lot for energy but produce cacao with never being able to eat chocolate, or cotton without ever being able to produce textiles. 3, articulate land restoration, security and peace. When land is suffering, then everything else suffers. Restoring land is not just an environmental issue, it's also a fight against forced migration, it's investment into peace, security and stability. We cannot build peace on dead land. Linking the sustainable management of land with strategies to prevent conflict and reducing forced displacement and food security is essential in order to create a stable and prosperous future on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic growth of Africa will be based on energy within land and ecosystems which are healthy, free from pollution and unsustainable use of resources. This is what our profound African wisdom says. When the head is there, we should not place the hat on the knee. Therefore, we need to play our cards right. After 40 years, we no longer have the excuse of youth or inexperience. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. I now give the floor to Dr. Fred Boltz from the GEF Secretariat to deliver remarks on behalf of the President and CEO of the GEF.
Thank you, Honourable Mr. Asahore. I'll be speaking in English. Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, distinguished participants, and delegates, dear colleagues, good morning. My name is Fred Boltz. I am Head of Programming at the Global Environment Facility, and I have the honor of representing Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, our CEO, who extends his respects and his warmest salutations to all. The Global Environment Facility is honored to join this historic 20th session of AMCEN, marking 4 decades of African leadership and action for the conservation of Africa's beautiful and vital environment. The GEF is proud to serve as a trusted and reliable partner to Africa, having deployed over $7.7 billion, nearly 1/3 of total GEF funding since our creation in 1991 to Africa, and in the last 3 years alone, having approved over $1 billion of funding for Africa's efforts to achieve the goals of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. These investments have enabled all of you, African nations, to achieve extraordinary environmental gains, such as the creation of over 160 new protected areas and the improved management of 480 protected areas that cover more than 280 million hectares, an area 5 times the size of Kenya and representing approximately, and actually over, 1/10 of this vast and beautiful African continent. In addition to the iconic Great Green Wall initiative, launched and sustained by all of you, that Commissioner Vilakati highlighted in his remarks. Extraordinary accomplishments, and let me take a moment to salute all of you for these extraordinary achievements by all of you African nations. The GEF is a partnership that works with recipient countries and 18 global and regional agencies such as our friends at UNEP, IUCN, and the African Development Bank, with whom we have mobilized over $50 billion additional dollars in co-financing for the environment and sustainable development in Africa. The GEF partnership serves recipient countries, supporting your efforts to achieve environmental outcomes of global importance in the conservation of terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystems and their rich biodiversity, mitigation of and adaptation to climate change, combating desertification and land degradation, and preventing pollution from hazardous chemicals, plastics, and waste. The GEF is not a traditional donor that decides alone what to fund. No, rather the GEF is a financial mechanism mandated to support countries to achieve their sovereign goals in environment and sustainable development. We are your global environment facility, transparently channeling funding to meet your environmental priorities. In these challenging times, with ODA commitments under threat, so are the resources provided to you through the GEF under threat. A decline in ODA, however, does not need to result in a decline in GEF funding, and it must not, or all life on this precious planet Earth will suffer, including that of we, Homo sapiens. Recently, a colleague in Botswana, which has committed over 40% of its land area to conservation, poignantly noted, "Do not wait for us to be suffering, to compromise our environment to meet growing human needs. Stand with us to achieve even greater environmental and sustainability gains." The GEF relies upon all of you to hold our donors to their lofty global commitments, commitments to doubling investments in biodiversity conservation, tripling investments in climate change mitigation and adaptation by 2030. The GEF mobilizes under 5% of global commitments by donor countries to the conservation of biological diversity. Where is the other 95%? You should demand transparency and accountability. The GEF is held accountable. We are transparent in mobilizing resources. We report to a council with equal representation of developed and developing countries, and we report to the 6 multilateral environmental agreements which we serve, including the UNCCD, whose Executive Secretary spoke earlier, and let me take a moment, Ibrahim, to congratulate you on an excellent mandate. We're very grateful for your leadership. Thank you so much. Funding for Africa's environment is also under threat from well-intended but frankly misguided political calls for new funds which risk further fragmentation of global environmental financing. Creating new funds means more funding consumed by new institutions in overhead, more bureaucracy, greater complexity, and ultimately less funding for countries, less funding to achieve and sustain environmental outcomes. Base your decisions on evidence. The GEF reports regularly to its representative council and to the COPs and our performance is independently evaluated on a frequent and systematic basis by the JEF's own independent evaluation office, by the conventions, by the G20, and most recently by MOPAN, the Multilateral Organization Performance Assessment Network, which in 2025 concluded that the JEF is the most effective multilateral environment and development fund. Please read these reports and base your decisions on evidence. The JEF serves you, and we hear you. In response to demands for increased efficiency, effectiveness, and greater country ownership, the JEF is undertaking aggressive streamlining measures now and in our next cycle, JEF 9, which begins in 2026. Our JEF 9 replenishment meetings began in May of this year, and the donors and constituents collectively embraced these aggressive reforms, noting that the mandate of the JEF is to deploy funding efficiently to recipient countries to deliver impact. The second meeting of our replenishment cycle will be held by the great nation of Botswana in October of 2025, and we are deeply grateful to Botswana. Minister Molotsi and his team are here today, and we thank you for hosting the second JEF replenishment in October of this year. We invite you all to join us, not merely as observers, but as contributors and decision makers to guide our future efforts. We are deeply grateful to the Côte d'Ivoire and South Africa, who are both JEF recipient countries and JEF donors, taking their seats at the table as key decision makers to guide the future of the JEF. We invite other nations to join and to represent Africa in this critical process. We hope that this privileged opportunity to join you at AMCEN 20 to reaffirm our partnership with Africa will set in motion a new era in which African nations stand as leaders of the JEF partnership to ensure that the JEF 9 replenishment achieves your priorities, meets Africa's needs for a nature-positive future to sustain a healthy and resilient planet for healthy people, and to fulfill the Africa 2060 vision. Please accept our deepest respect and heartfelt thanks. Asante sana.
Merci à vous, Dr. Bols. À présent, je voudrais inviter notre collègue, Dr. Deborah Mlongo Barasa, ministre de l'Environnement, du Changement climatique et des Forêts du Kenya. C'est notre collègue, on l'applaudit.
The Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Chakis Asahor, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development and Ecological Transition, Côte d'Ivoire, representing AMCEN President, Your Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Munir, incoming AMCEN President and Minister of Environment of the State of Libya, Your Excellency Moses Vilakati, Commissioner of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment, AUC, Dr. Elizabeth Mirema, Deputy Executive Director, UNEP, Dr. Ibrahim Tiao, Executive Secretary, UNCCD. I'm reminded of the years 2022-2023 when disaster, disease, and destruction hit Africa. The devastating Cyclone Freddy that battered Malawi and Madagascar, displacing thousands, to the worst drought in 40 years across the greater Horn of Africa, including Kenya. The floods in Nigeria and Cameroon, and conflicts in part of the Sahel that left people desperate and destitute. Africa was facing one of the deadliest cholera resurgences on a background of multiple catastrophes. There were ripple effects of environmental disasters. Yet, they were not isolated. They collided, amplifying risks disrupting systems, and deepening vulnerabilities. It was a stark reality that climate change is not a distant threat. It is a public health emergency, an economic crisis, a humanitarian disaster, and an ecological tragedy, all tied into one. But it is also in moments like these, when the land cries and people suffer, that we are reminded why AMCEN exists. In 1985, as drought, desertification, and famine ravaged parts of Africa, visionary African leaders from across the continent courageously came together, speaking in one voice for Africa and its environment. And so AMCEN was born. Since then, AMCEN has grown into a powerful force, a convener of ministers, bridging regions, building conversations, guiding policies, catalyzing implementation, and championing Africa's voice at global platform. Over the 40 years, with 19 ordinary sessions and 10 special sessions, AMCEN has built Africa's negotiating power in global platforms. One of AMCEN's proudest achievements has been bringing African countries together to establish shared positions on critical issues, including climate change, biodiversity, desertification, pollution, and sustainable development. These voices have had a significant impact on global decisions under key international agreements, including the UNFCCC, UNCBD, UNCCD, and the UNEA. Despite our progress, Africa still faces significant challenges, including funding gaps, data gaps, weak enforcement of environmental law, and increasing conflicts over natural resources. To overcome these hurdles, we must strengthen AMCEN's capacity and support systems so it can better help member countries turn decisions into real, tangible, on-the-ground action. Under the theme, 4 decades of environmental action in Africa, reflecting on the past and imagining the future, we have a chance to reflect, reevaluate, re-strategize, reignite, and reaffirm our collective commitment to building a more sustainable future for generations to come. Let AMCEN at 40 be remembered not just as a milestone, but as a turning point, a moment we rose above ceremony and recommitted to impact. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, partners, and friends, Kenya is honored that the government of Libya is hosting this important event and extends appreciation to the AMCEN Bureau and Secretariat for facilitating this convening at the global headquarters of the UNEP. Kenya has demonstrated strong leadership in protecting the environment and combating climate change by implementing key laws and plans, from the Climate Change Act to the Sustainable Waste Management Act and the latest National Climate Change Action Plan. Kenya is focusing on nature-based solutions, circular economy, and community efforts to heal the land and protect biodiversity. These steps reflect Kenya's commitment to sustainable and inclusive environmental care. Kenya has been a strong supporter of AMCEN regional environmental efforts, actively championing initiatives that unite African countries around common goals. As we prepare to host the 7th session of UNEA, Kenya is committed to ensuring that AMCEN's collective voice continues to shape global environmental policies and advance Africa's sustainable development goals. And now, allow me to invite you to pause and look around you. You're in Kenya, a land of towering Mount Kenya, the sacred forests of the Aberdares. Take some time to walk around Karura Forest or visit the tranquil Nairobi Arboretum. Venture out to Amboseli, where elephants graze, or the Great Rift Valley, where flamingos dance. This is not just tourism, this is our living heritage, our ecological cathedral. It is what we fight for, and it is what AMCEN stands to protect. So in closing, let us demonstrate that Africa is not waiting to be rescued. We are rising to lead. And so on behalf of the government of Kenya, I welcome you once again to Nairobi, Kenya, and let this session be of memory, of meaning, and of movement. Asante.
Merci beaucoup, chers collègues. À présent, c'est pour moi un honneur et un plaisir d'inviter son Excellence Dr Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi, Premier secrétaire du cabinet de la République du Kenya, à prononcer son discours d'ouverture.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Jacques Asahor Konan, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development and Ecological Transition of Côte d'Ivoire, and also the President at this session. Your Excellency, Dr. Ibrahim Munir, Minister for Environment of the State of Libya and incoming President of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment. Madame Elizabeth Murema, Deputy Executive Director of UNEP. Ibrahim Thiaw, Outgoing Executive Secretary, UNCD. The Honorable Moses Bilakati, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development and the Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment of the African Union Commission. Ministers present in the auditorium, I salute you all. The record shows that we have 35 ministers in attendance and 53 countries represented today at this session. Heads of UN agencies, funds and programs present, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to address this distinguished assembly at the opening of the 20th Ordinary Session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, AMCEN, a pivotal forum for advancing Africa's collective environmental priorities. This session also marks a significant milestone, 40 years since AMCEN's founding in 1985 in Cairo. As the saying goes, life begins at 40. And so does a renewed commitment to our continent's environmental future. On behalf of His Excellency President William Ruto, the government and the people of the Republic of Kenya, I warmly welcome all of you to Kenya. We are truly delighted to host you in a country renowned for its rich heritage, breathtaking geographical beauty, and the warm hospitality of its people. Karibuni, Kenya. More importantly, I thank the State of Libya, the host of this session, for inviting me to deliver the keynote address. I also express gratitude to the Director General of the United Nations offices at Nairobi for allowing AMCEN to hold this session at this campus. The year 2025 offers a timely moment to reflect on 4 decades of progress since the establishment of AMCEN as Africa's foremost ministerial platform for environmental governance and regional leadership. This historic milestone is aptly reflected in the theme of the 20th Ordinary Session, 4 decades of environmental action in Africa, reflecting on the past and imagining the future. Looking forward, the conference also serves as a significant forum to shape Africa's unified position and coordinated engagement in forthcoming global environmental fora. May I observe that the state of the global environment remains deeply concerning. Just 4 months ago, the World Meteorological Organization reported that the average global temperature in 2024 exceeded the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, above the pre-industrial levels. This alarming trend underscores the inadequacy of the current global efforts to combat climate change. The United Nations estimates that nearly 1 million species are at the risk of extinction, a gloom prospect that could become reality if we fail to curb the unsustainable use of land, water, and energy, and fall short of meeting the 2030 biodiversity conservation targets. Pollution is intensifying. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, about 7 billion metric tons of plastic waste is already polluting the environment. Yet the world continues to generate some 430 metric tons of plastics annually. The growing frequency and intensity of environmental challenges are threatening poverty reduction efforts and sustainable development. Without urgent action, declining ecosystem resilience will worsen, water scarcity, food insecurity, disease outbreaks, and extreme weather events. In this regard, the 20th Ordinary Session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment must therefore provide strategic policy guidance on Africa's common position to these environmental challenges. In the months ahead, key global fora, including COP15 of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, the INC 5.2 on the Global Plastics Treaty, COP30 on climate change, COP6 of the Minamata Convention on Mercury, and UNEA 7 will offer crucial opportunities for bold, ambitious, and decisive action to reverse environmental degradation. I note with keen interest that the timely and relevant agenda before us, which encompasses crucial policy dialogues on sustainable and climate-resilient financing and budgeting, the strategic engagement of the G20 in addressing Africa's environmental challenges, the potential of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, and early warning systems to advance sustainability, and the pivotal role of minerals and energy transition in shaping Africa's green future. These sub-themes reflect the environmental realities facing Africa today, while aligning with our priorities and the aspirations outlined in the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the Global 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To this end, it remains essential to continue strengthening UNEP by advancing the full consolidation of its headquarters functions in Nairobi, as reaffirmed at the Rio +20 conference 13 years ago. To further anchor Nairobi's role as a global environmental hub, we encourage collective support for hosting the secretariats of both the Science Policy Panel and the forthcoming Global Plastics Treaty within UNEP. I applaud the efforts that led to the successful designation of UNEP in Nairobi as the interim host of the Science Policy Panel Secretariat during the recent meeting in Uruguay. We humbly urge your continued support towards a decision that will confirm UNEP as the permanent home of this important institution. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, I wish to briefly highlight Kenya's national efforts in environmental conservation and sustainable development. We have enacted bold legal and policy frameworks aimed at addressing climate change and a wide range of environmental challenges. Kenya's energy sector is predominantly green, with over 90% powered by renewable sources. Since 2017, we have taken strong action against plastic pollution, including a nationwide ban on the manufacture, use, and importation of plastic carrier bags. We also remain committed to biodiversity conservation through the protection and management of national parks, reserves, and marine ecosystems. We also continue to champion a greater role for youth in environmental affairs, recognizing them as a major force in shaping Africa's future, while also acknowledging the growing impact of eco-anxiety and climate-related distress on their well-being. As a country, we are profoundly honored to host both the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and the United Nations Human Settlements Programme, UN Habitat, in Nairobi. And we remain firmly committed to our role as a multilateral hub. We sincerely appreciate the resolute support of the African continent in advancing the strengthening of these crucial UN institutions on African soil. Over the weekend, I had the opportunity to visit the United Nations complex. This is where we are in Nairobi, and was impressed by the ongoing expansion and the sustainable design of the new green building within the 140-acre UN Gigiri compound. I commend Madam Zainab Hawa Bangura, Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, and her team for their forward-looking leadership and the commitment to enhancing the stature and capacity of the UN presence in our region. The 20th Ordinary Session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment convenes at a time of uncertainty, marked by a global retreat in development financing. This moment calls for bold, ambitious, and actionable outcomes that speak to Africa's unique context and enduring aspirations. With these remarks, I wish you fruitful deliberations and a highly successful ministerial session. May our collective efforts today shape a more sustainable and resilient Africa for generations to come. Thank you. Asante sana.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Merci pour votre présence et merci pour le cachet spécial que cette présence confère à nos travaux. Excellence, chers délégués, chers participants, nous arrivons maintenant à la fin de la cérémonie officielle d'ouverture du segment ministériel. Nous allons permettre à Monsieur le Premier ministre de se retirer, puis nous prendrons une courte pause de 15 minutes avant la suite de nos travaux. Nous reprendrons nos travaux, ma montre faisant foi, à midi, pile. Excellence, Monsieur le Premier ministre, merci d'être venu. Merci. La séance est suspendue. Merci beaucoup.